Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into a story about incredible faith, a really powerful paradox, and a mission to bridge a divide that honestly impacts millions of lives. So let's start with the big question, the mystery at the heart of all of this. Sub-Saharan Africa is now home to the largest percentage of Christians on the entire planet. I mean, the growth is just staggering. And yet, so many of these same communities are facing these overwhelming challenges. Everything from poverty to corruption. So how can a faith that's growing so fast seem to have such a limited impact on the world around it? It doesn't quite add up, right?
And this brings us to what a lot of people are calling Africa's Christian paradox. It's this major disconnect between massive, and I mean massive, spiritual growth on one hand, and this persistent, really tough societal brokenness on the other.
And this quote from theologian Landa Cope, it just grounds this whole thing in a heartbreaking reality. She points to Rwanda, where before the 1994 genocide, a huge portion of the population called themselves Christians. But that shared faith couldn't stop one of the most horrific events of the 20th century. It really shows you that the stakes in this conversation, they're incredibly high.
There's this powerful metaphor that just gets right to the heart of the issue. The faith is a mile wide when you look at the numbers. The churches are full, people are converting, all of that. But it's only an inch deep when it comes to actually changing the fabric of society. So you have to ask, what's causing this kind of shallow faith?
Well, the diagnosis seems to point to a fundamental split, a worldview where faith has kind of become divided against itself.
And the root of the problem has a name. It's called the secular-sacred divide. Basically, it's a way of thinking that puts your faith in one little box, and then the rest of your life, your job, your community, politics, justice, goes in a completely separate box. It's like we build this mental wall between our spiritual lives and our public lives.
And you can see exactly how that divide plays out right here. The sacred sphere, that's what happens on Sunday. It's church, it's prayer, it's thinking about the afterlife. Then you've got the secular sphere, which is basically everything else. It's your work on Monday, it's the economy, it's your local government. And when you see these as separate, faith gets trapped in our private lives, and it just loses its power to engage with and transform the world.
But here's the thing. It wasn't always like this. In the early church, what you said and what you did were two sides of the same coin. But then, this historical shift happened, something people call the Great Reversal. Influenced by old Greek philosophy that separated the spiritual from the material, Christianity started to focus almost entirely on saving souls for the next life, and it kind of left society's problems for other people to deal with.
Okay, so if a divided faith is the problem, what's the solution? Well, the answer seems to be in an idea that's all about putting back together what was torn apart.
And that solution has a name. It's integral mission, or, in the original Spanish, misión integral. The term was coined by the great Latin American theologian C. Ray Padilla, and it's a completely holistic vision. It says that sharing the good news and working for social justice, they aren't two different jobs. Nope, they are one and the same mission. So how does this actually work? Well, a fantastic way to think about it is to see Jesus in his dual role as both priest and king. As priest, he offers salvation and reconciles us to God. That's the evangelism part we know. But as king, he has authority over all of creation and calls us to bring justice and healing to our societies. Integral mission says you need both of these truths held together in this healthy, dynamic tension.
And to really make this idea stick, Padilla himself gave us this perfect, unforgettable metaphor. He said that evangelism and social action are like the two wings of an airplane. You absolutely need both to fly. If you only have one, you're just going to end up spinning in circles.
Now, this all sounds really good in theory, right? But is it actually working? What do the leaders on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa say about the barriers they're really facing? Well, some new research gives us a really clear and honestly kind of shocking picture.
So researchers went out and surveyed Christian leaders all across the continent, and they asked a really simple question. What are the biggest challenges you face when it comes to getting training? And this chart shows what they said. You can see a few different things listed, from logistical problems to a lack of local development, but one answer right there at the top. It was chosen by almost everyone.
Get this, 94.4%. That's how many leaders said that financial challenges are the single biggest barrier stopping them from getting deeper training. The cost of tuition, travel, even just books. It's a massive, massive hurdle.
And it goes even deeper than that.
When they were asked specifically what stops them from putting integral mission into practice, the answers weren't theological, they were really practical. As you can see here, a huge 80% pointed to the number one barrier, leadership and empowerment challenges. And then over 64% pointed to the second one, just a simple lack of practical models to follow. They need to see how it's done, and they need to feel empowered to actually go and do it.
And this brings us right back to where we started. When they were asked why there's this lack of understanding, the reasons are almost perfectly split into thirds. The chart shows it all. 34% said the focus is just too narrow. It's only on personal salvation. Another 33% said it's a lack of access to teaching on this stuff. And 32% said they just don't have practical models. So it's clear the exact secular-sacred divide we talked about is being reinforced by the kind of training that's available.
Okay, so the problem is clear, and the barriers are very, very real. But the research also points toward a pretty innovative solution, one that doesn't come from a boardroom somewhere, but from a kitchen. The proposed solution is a digital-first course that's designed to tackle every single barrier we just talked about. First, it's mobile-first, using short, bite-sized lessons that work on a smartphone to get around the cost and access problems. Second, it's co-created with African leaders, not just for them, which makes sure it's culturally relevant. Third, it's super practical, filled with the real-world case studies leaders are asking for. And finally, it builds a community of support through mentorship and coaching.
And this whole idea is wrapped up in this incredible quote from a Ghanaian pastor. He said, "It is good if you invite me to your table, but it is far better if you invite me into the kitchen." See, for too long, solutions have just been served up from the outside. But real partnership, real empowerment, that means inviting leaders into the kitchen to be co-creators in the whole process, mixing their own wisdom and experience into the recipe.
And that brings us to our final, and I think most important question. What if we've been focused on the wrong thing this whole time? Maybe the real key to unlocking the power of faith in society isn't about exporting these pre-packaged answers. Maybe it's about creating a space, a kitchen, where local leaders have the tools, the ingredients, and the freedom to cook up their own solutions for their own communities. Now that is a thought worth exploring. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.